Imagine if your entire existence, your destiny, your health, even your very thoughts, had been decided before you ever took your first breath. All because your ancestors were fixated on preserving a pure bloodline. For centuries, royal dynasties across the world struck a chilling bargain. They exchanged genetic stability for political dominance. The outcome was devastating. Minds broken, bodies weakened, and family trees so tangled they barely made sense. Today, we're delving into the tragic, astonishing, and often deeply disturbing lives of some of history's most inbred women. And trust me, by the time we reach number 1, you'll be left speechless. At number 10, we begin with Isabella II of Spain, who reigned from 1833 to 1868. Her story isn't defined by royal splendor, but rather by the heavy toll of generations of close intermarriage. Born in 1830, her birth as a daughter was oddly celebrated, coming after her father's long and frustrated desire for a male heir. Yet the relief was short-lived. From the start, both Isabella's health and that of her sister caused quiet unease. Unsurprisingly, her very existence was the outcome of a marriage between an uncle and his niece. The story grows even more complicated. On one branch of her family tree, Isabella's grandparents were also her great-grandparents, an almost impossible knot of lineage. At just 16, she was wed to her double second cousin. Over the years, she gave birth to 11 children, but only 5 survived beyond infancy. To make matters even murkier, many historians believe that none of those surviving children were fathered by her husband. Their marriage was most likely strained, overshadowed by private truths about his identity that were never fully spoken aloud. Ultimately, Isabella was dethroned, leaving behind a legacy deeply marked by her family's genetic entrapments. At number 9, we encounter Marie-Louise of Austria. She was born into one of Europe's most tangled dynasties, where her parents were double first cousins, sharing both sets of grandparents. In a world where cousin marriages were not the exception but the expectation, tragedy was common. Out of 12 children in her family, only 7 made it to adulthood. The degree of inbreeding in her bloodline was extraordinary. From a genetic perspective, Marie-Louise had only 4 distinct great-grandparents, half the usual number. Such genetic compression is something scientists today typically observe only in isolated populations. At the age of 18, Marie-Louise was given in marriage to none other than Napoleon Bonaparte, once her father's bitter enemy. The union was not about love, but strategy, an attempt to forge peace and ensure a future heir. For Marie-Louise, it meant carrying the burden of an empire on her young shoulders. At number 8, the story shifts from royal courts to the stark reality of a small American town. Lorraine Whitaker's life shows that the consequences of extreme inbreeding are not just relics of the past. They still echo in the modern world. Featured in a widely known documentary, the Whitaker family became a haunting example of what happens when isolation and repeated intermarriage go unchecked. Lorraine is often cited as one of the most inbred individuals documented in recent times. She is also the mother of Timmy Whitaker, regarded by many as possibly the most genetically impacted person alive today. Their tale is disturbing, not for spectacle, but as a sobering reminder that inbreeding is not just royal history. It is a human issue, still unfolding in hidden corners of the world. At number 7, we meet Maria the Pious of Portugal, though some might argue the title, Maria the Troubled, better fits her story. Born in 1734, Maria's life was marked by mounting mental struggles and a bloodline weighed down by generations of intermarriage. Her parents, King Joseph I of Portugal and Maria Anna of Spain, were already the 16th Iberian royal couple united through close kinship, and her own story was about to follow the same dangerous path. Maria herself, under immense pressure to preserve the royal bloodline, made a fateful choice that defined her legacy. She married her own uncle. The consequences were as grim as they were inevitable. Half of her children did not survive, with genetic complications almost certainly playing a major role. As the years passed, Maria's mental health declined until she was declared unfit to rule. Her downfall was not brought about by invasion or revolution, but by the silent, relentless toll of repeated inbreeding. At number 6, we come to the tragic story of Marie-Louise Elisabeth d'Orléans, whose life could be mistaken for a Gothic tragedy penned in sorrow and blood. She was born into a deeply troubled royal arrangement, her father compelled to marry his cousin, who herself was the illegitimate daughter of King Louis XIV. As the eldest surviving child of this union, Marie-Louise had little control over her destiny. She was later married to yet another cousin, Prince Charles of Berry. Together they had 3 children, none of whom survived beyond childhood. Whether their deaths were the result of heavy inbreeding or simple misfortune, history cannot say with certainty. What is known is that Marie-Louise turned to alcohol shockingly early, with reports suggesting as young as 14. Was it a desperate cry for help, or merely a way to endure the burden of her circumstances? Whatever the reason, her legacy stands as a grim reminder of dynastic duty gone tragically astray. At number 5, we turn to a lesser-known yet captivating royal figure, Princess Alexia of Greece. Born in 1965, her life represents the crossroads between the fading era of arranged royal unions and the lingering effects of aristocratic inbreeding. She and her 4 siblings were the product of one of the last notable marriages between a reigning king and a royal princess. But behind the romantic image was a much more complex truth. Her parents, Queen Anne-Marie of Denmark and King Constantine II of Greece, were not just royals, they were closely related, twice over. They were both second cousins and third cousins, creating a dual tie that was as political as it was personal. Their family trees were tangled and burdened with repetition. Constantine's great-grandparents were siblings, and one of his grandmothers was also the sister of his great-grandfather. Anne-Marie's ancestry carried its own intricate web of bloodlines. Though their marriage appeared affectionate, the close kinship ensured their children, including Alexia, were inbred to a degree, similar to the famous case of Britain's Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. It is a modern royal tale, with roots deep in an old and risky tradition. In the 4th spot is someone seldom mentioned, despite her extraordinary genetic legacy, Maria Antonia of Austria. A member of the Habsburg dynasty, she surpassed even her infamous uncle, Charles II of Spain, when it came to the degree of inbreeding. While Charles is often considered the ultimate symbol of the Habsburgs' genetic decline, Maria Antonia's family history was even more entangled. Her lineage was not a branching tree, but more like a looping vine, full of repeated unions and repeated names. Some have even described it as less a family tree and more a genetic circle. The level of inbreeding in her case was so extreme that her genetic makeup resembled that of a child born to 2 full siblings. Yet, despite this, her story often remains in the shadows. History may have largely overlooked her, but from a genetic perspective, she represented the absolute height of Habsburg inbreeding, a quiet yet unforgettable figure in this long and tangled saga. Moving far back in history, number 3 introduces us to 2 enigmatic figures remembered not by name, but by numbers. Mummies 317A and 317B. Though they never lived to rule, their small preserved bodies tell a heartbreaking story of ancient grief and genetic cost. These two infant girls, likely stillborn, were the daughters of Pharaoh Tutankhamun and his wife Ankhesenamun around 1300 BCE. And here lies the unsettling truth. Ankhesenamun was not only Tutankhamun's queen, but also his half-sister. They shared the same father, continuing a long-standing tradition of sibling marriage within Egypt's royal bloodline. Tutankhamun himself was already the product of generations of tightly restricted unions. By the time his daughters were conceived, the genetic risks had reached a catastrophic high. Their brief lives, marked by deformities and fragility, serve as chilling evidence that not even kings considered divine could escape the harsh mathematics of inbreeding. At number 2, we shift from ancient palaces to a chilling modern case, that of Kimberly, known under a pseudonym. Though not a royal, her story reveals some of the darkest outcomes of unchecked inbreeding in recent memory. Kimberly's case comes from Australia, where her family, publicly identified only by an alias, became the focus of one of the most shocking genetic and legal discoveries of the early 2000s. Living in extreme isolation, the family engaged in generations of intermarriage, forming a closed community with virtually no outside genetic influence. When authorities finally uncovered the truth, they were faced with a disturbing and tangled situation that resulted in multiple investigations and arrests. Kimberly, born into this environment, stands as one of the most genetically affected individuals ever recorded. Her tragedy had nothing to do with royal ambition or dynastic pride. It is a modern-day warning of how isolation and lack of oversight can exact a devastating human cost. And at number 1, we come to Cleopatra II Philopator, the woman who more than anyone embodied the deliberate, relentless pursuit of power through inbreeding. Forget the romanticized image of Cleopatra often portrayed in movies. This Cleopatra was no legend, but the living symbol of dynastic obsession. Though she ruled Egypt, Cleopatra II's heritage was entirely Greek-Macedonian, born from the Ptolemaic dynasty, a line notorious for its relentless practice of sibling and uncle-niece marriages to preserve concentrated power. Her parents were siblings, her grandparents were siblings, and even her own brothers and sisters married one another before she ultimately ruled on her own. Cleopatra II became a living symbol of bloodline preservation, powerful yet weighed down by the immense cost. Even her name, borrowed from a rare Syrian princess, was one of the only signs that outsiders had ever touched the family tree. Cleopatra II was far more than just another royal. She represented the genetic endpoint of generations of carefully woven, tightly bound lineage. A formidable ruler, but one whose very biology carried the crushing weight of her family's calculated ambitions. From glittering palaces to remote villages, from golden crowns to hidden isolation, the quest for purity, dominance, and legacy has shaped the lives of these women into stories of heartbreak, endurance, and revelation. Their histories remind us that the course of humanity is not only determined by politics and wars, but also by the invisible forces of biology and blood.